Hello and welcome to the Browns Blitz. Today is Tuesday, January the 18th, and this is episode number 133. I am your host, Rod Bloom. Joining me tonight is my brother, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, how are things going for you?
Well, pretty good now that I'm more or less dug out of that foot and a half of snow that we got over the weekend.
You guys got hammered. I saw a lot of pictures on Twitter of a lot of different people. We got about an inch, maybe inch and a half down here.
Yeah. I spent a good 2 hours on my tractor yesterday with the bucket, scooping snow and dumping it because it was too much to plow.
Wow. Yeah. I don't miss that part of Cleveland. I got to be honest.
Yeah, we do okay with snow on the east side. It's just that we haven't had anything this deep in a long time.
No, that's more than significant, I would say.
It's a lot. It's a lot to move around.
Yeah, we wrapped up the season last week. Kind of did a season closing show, so we're officially into the off season and our breakdown and projections and analysis and everything else. So we're going to take it show by show, and for the listeners, we're going to try to go methodically through everything and just kind of what would make sense to me. So we're going to start out tonight just talking about Browns players who are pending free agents, RFAs, and things like that. We're going to go over the calendar, and we're going to just talk about the draft picks the Browns have, things like that, just kind of things to get the ball rolling. And then as we get into the coming month or two, we'll probably break down the roster by positions and look at where the Browns' biggest needs are and talk more specifically about guys who we think will potentially not be back for monetary or performance reasons. So we'll get into that, and of course we're going to start hitting on the draft here pretty hard too. So a lot to cover in the next what do we have, Jeff? We got 3 months and 10 days or so until the draft. 3 months and 10 days until the NFL draft. So we've got a little bit of time.
Yeah. The combine is actually 6 weeks from today.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that's one date I didn't have. So February 22nd to March 8th is the franchise and transition tag period. And then free agency starts on March the 16th at 4:00. Off-season
tampering
workouts.
Period is a couple days before that.
What's that?
The tampering period starts on the 14th, so that's when teams can start talking.
Yeah, that's
So that's when all the juicy rumors will start swirling.
Right.
About
right.
potential free agents.
Yeah. So and then the workouts for teams with new head coaches start April the 4th, and for teams like the Browns, at least so far, they say April the 4th, April the 18th is the off-season workouts begin. April the 27th is the last day to match on restricted free agents, and then the draft begins on April the 28th and runs through April the 30th. So a lot of stuff going on. Most of it not for a month or two. So
right.
Yeah. So
plenty of time to dissect, right?
That's right. So yeah, let's just talk briefly about the draft picks that the Browns have. So the Browns have all of their own picks, and they're picking 13th. But we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, and I guess at this point, There isn't a list of all the picks out, so I believe there may be a coin flip left or something to determine whether they're picking 13th every round or whether that's going to change to, I don't know, 12th or 14th, alternately.
Right.
But the Browns do have a pick in that range, 1 through 7, and then they have the Lions pick in the 4th round, which is pick number 2. So I believe that pick I don't think that's going to change from 2, so that should be number 2. I'm not sure where that pick came from, but moving up to 2 in the 4th round is pretty decent, I would say. That pick could turn into something.
In theory, a shot at another top 100 player.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. So let's look at free agents. Who the Browns had on their roster in 2021, and guys who are now free agents entering 2022. And let's just talk about these guys a little bit, because Browns fans kind of want to bring everybody back.
That's normal. Anybody that played
it's
well.
normal. It's like, well,
Right.
and even if a guy made a few good plays, and and I'm not talking about any specific player here. If a guy made a few good plays and that's what you remember about him, you're gonna be, man, we can't let that guy go. He's too good. We got to keep him.
Right.
And there's more than that to the business of football. There's, you got to look at the guy's his performance in 2021. You got to look at what you think he's going to do next season. Maybe based on his age, based on how he fits in with your plans for next season, and you got to look at what it's going to cost you to bring him back, and
Right.
is he worth that much to bring him back? Because this, during the season, we're rooting for this team. We're rooting for every player on this team. But this is the offseason where this really becomes a business, and you have to be smart, and you have to sign the best guys for the least amount of money so that you can do things like extend Myles Garrett and extend your offensive linemen and things like this. So this is where you really have to be smart and not make decisions with your heart.
Right. That's where you have to trust your front office, your young general manager who has demonstrated to this point that he's up to the task, and you have to kind of root for their front office for a little while that they're going to put together what you consider to be a highly competitive roster to get ready for next season.
Yeah, so we're going to dive in just with probably the top guy that everybody's thinking about, and that's Jidavian Clowney, who had a really nice season for the Browns. He came in on a 1-year deal. It is cap number at 3.8. I don't know if that's his actual salary, if that's what it was in 21 or not, but that's 3.8 million or somewhere around that area is what he made this season.
So that was his base salary. I think the total deal was more in the range of 8 million, with a bunch of deferred money and void years and stuff. So you have to kind of look at it as the production that you got out of $8 million over the course of a 16-game season or 17-game season, excuse me.
Right, and 8 million is probably not what Jidavian Clowney's thinking for 2022.
I would say not.
I mean, he had a nice season. He had the best season he's had in a long time.
Right.
So what did he end up with? Was it 9 sacks? 8 or 9?
I think something like that. Yeah. I mean, he had a really good season. Yeah. I mean, as a compliment to Myles Garrett. I don't, the Browns would be hard pressed to find somebody as productive, as disruptive as Jidavian Clowney. But it's kind of what you expect from a former number 1 overall pick, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Browns have brought a lot of free agents in over the past, 10, 20 years, and Clowney lived up to, he did as well as what you could have possibly expected, I think. He played almost every game. His sack number was the most sacks he's had in a long, long time, and he really did. He complimented Myles, and like you said, I think they would have a really hard time finding somebody else to plug into that spot to get the same exact production out of next season.
Right.
So that makes it understandable that the fans are saying, well, you got to sign him because you can't
bring him back,
replace him. Bring him back because you can't replace him.
Right.
But the issue is, what's the number? And what does that number do to the rest of your roster? Salary cap's going to go up. You're going to probably cut some cap in some other places. So you know what? If you can sign him and bring him back comfortably on the right deal, I think it probably makes sense. If you feel like the term of the deal is smart, like I don't know if you want to sign Jidavian Clowney to a 3-year deal, 3 or 4 year deal at 15-20 million a year, because he's getting a little bit older, and he still, even though he played most of the games this season, he still has that injury history.
Right.
But the question is, what's the number? What's the number? Is there a number that's good for him and good for the Browns?
Right. And I guess that's sort of the whole point of prove it deals. He came in here on a prove it deal because he had a rough season last year, was injured, was low production, and he, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, none of us really expected Jidavian Clowney to be the guy that we were going to plug in there, but he kind of came in at the end, and no one else was offering him anything. So here's the prove it deal, okay? And you say, well, the Browns can win or lose on a prove it deal, okay? And so can the player. I think he absolutely earned his money and then some.
Yeah.
But what you have to take along with that is he proved it. So now he deserves the right next year to be paid. And the Browns have to make the decision whether or not they can afford to do that, number one. It makes good financial sense. Mm-hmm. And then number two, are there equally valuable type guys that they can plug in? And that sort of directly relates back to question number one. Can they bring somebody else in that $8 million range, either on a prove it deal or somebody who's not necessarily of the same pedigree as Jidavian Clowney, right? That will give you adequate production for that number. Let's just say, for instance, that the Browns were to extend Clowney for another 3 seasons at 18 to 20 million, which I think that's what he's going to command. With the salary cap going up, and we know how elite edges are paid in the NFL. When these guys are the first ones that come off the board in free agency, and based on what Clowney did this year, he's going to be one of the first guys that teams look at. So I really have to question, if they were to extend him at some kind of number like that, could they possibly get enough production out of him to make that a smart investment? He would have to, again, 9 sacks and playing like he did this year at $8 million is 100%, 150% value, whatever. But if you have to pay him twice as much or 2.5 times as much, okay, what does that relate to in terms of value? And I think the value drops pretty significantly. It's really putting a target on his back, right, in terms of how well he's got to play for us the next couple of years at that level. And so, with all the questions that we now have on the defensive line, you'd love to be able to answer that one just with money. I just don't know that it makes financial sense for the Browns or for Jidavian Clowney to do that here.
Yeah, and you don't know how many other teams are going to be, are going to get into that bidding war too.
Right.
For Clowney. So
right.
I think Browns fans have to be realistic that we would, in the thought that it would be great to bring him back, but you are not going to bring Jidavian Clowney back regardless of cost. And I don't think that's not how Andrew Berry operates, and that's not what's going to happen. So I think if they can get the right deal, I think they'll bring him back. If they can't, I mean, if somebody offers him a huge deal like what happened, something like, when Arizona, made the deal with J.J. Watt, if something like that happens, the Browns are going to say, good luck.
And look at the value, just for instance, look at the value that Arizona got out of that signing. J.J. Watt missed a big chunk of the season this year, and they committed huge money to him. Okay, so, and I think the same can be said for all of these UFAs. What's the cost to extend them versus replacement cost? And do you realize enough value by doing that? And, there's a lot that comes into play for a general manager in making that determination, other than, just the fans saying, boy, I really liked how he played. I hope he comes back. We all hope that we get that kind of production out of that position. But ultimately, the general manager has to decide, at what dollar amount that makes sense.
Yeah, and just briefly here, because I'm kind of changing the topic a little bit, but people will talk about the importance of hitting on draft picks. The importance on hitting on these big free agency signings, I think, is so much higher than hitting on free agents. If you blow a first round pick, you blew a first round pick. But if you blow a signing like you mentioned J.J. Watt, if you sign somebody to a huge deal like that and there's no production, not only did you miss out on somebody else, it's really tied your hands to be able to do other things. Whereas if you just miss on a pick, it's really not bootstrapping you in any other way.
Right. Yep.
So, okay, let's move on. We've got quite a few guys. So, Chris Hubbard. Chris Hubbard, a guy who the Browns really could have used this season. But he's kind of getting up there in age. I don't know what his market's going to be, after missing this season. He's had some injuries on that. Do you think the Browns would make an effort to bring Chris Hubbard back, or do you think they would be more likely to look elsewhere to refortify that offensive line depth?
Well, they're definitely going to have to address the swing tackle position. And, like we've mentioned before, Jack Conklin is still kind of up in the air from a health standpoint. So they're going to bring in somebody experienced at the tackle position. I think Chris Hubbard is somebody that this organization really likes and appreciates. And it was a huge loss when he went down early in the season. It just forced all the other young guys into, really too high expectations, I think, for the rookies and the free agent backups. It would have really been a key position if Chris Hubbard had stayed healthy this year, with all the injuries that we suffered at the tackle position. With all that said, it's kind of the same story. Can you afford to pay a guy that kind of money, particularly coming off of the injuries, to ride the bench? and just as an insurance policy. And we had this conversation at the beginning of the season about Chris Hubbard. Were they going to just go ahead and give those snaps to younger guys? Now in hindsight, you go, Jesus, that was kind of dumb. It really would have been smart to have him on the roster. Just injury precluded that. So,
yeah,
I honestly, I think they'll find somebody else in that mold. Somebody younger, somebody less expensive, that is a little bit more experienced to, be that backup tackle. I certainly hope they do, because I don't know that counting on the couple of young guys that we have to back up Jack Conklin if he can't go early is real smart strategy.
Yeah, I mean, we really felt like we had a ton of offensive line depth, and there is, but I guess it just wasn't as developed as what we thought. I mean, I think Blake Hance and Michael Dunn played pretty well, before they got hurt, but, beyond those guys.
They're both playing out of position.
Yeah, they were.
And Blake Hance did a great job, again, playing out of position.
Those guys just went out and played wherever they were asked to play.
Right. And James Hudson came along as the year went on, but again, as a fourth round rookie, you can't really expect the guy to go out there and compete at the NFL level as a starter in his first year. It's just unrealistic. So, hopefully he gets better next year, and we can plug in a couple of those guys like that. But I still think it's a position of need for us to find an experienced tackle to fill that Chris Hubbard role next year. And I think Andrew Berry's going to have to find somebody like that. And hopefully it's at, a more team-friendly number than where Chris Hubbard was in the last year of his deal.
Yeah, definitely. His his salary was in the $5 million range. Is that right?
I think he's total around $7.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to Takk McKinley. Do you think Takk McKinley had enough of a chance to show enough to create a market for himself? And, I think it was pretty clear that the Browns wanted him here with all the attempts to get him here. Do you think that plays a part in, in him wanting to come back here, maybe on a similar type deal again?
I think if Takk had stayed healthy, he would definitely have been a guy the Browns would be bringing back next year as the pass rush specialist, the third down edge. Mm-hmm. But he's now, unfortunately, in the category of Olivier Vernon, where I don't think Olivier Vernon played anywhere this year, did he?
I never heard anything about him playing this year.
The thing with an Achilles is, it could be 12 months. It could be,
well, that's true.
Ending. So
yeah, he might not even be able to be ready by the time the season starts.
Yeah, I seriously doubt that you're going to see Takk McKinley next year, just because of the injury. But guy in his early part of his career, 26 years old, a specialist like that who was affordable. I think, they definitely would have looked at bringing him back next year. And, they may have even thought of him as the guy maybe stepping in for Clowney, but that all kind of blew up, with the injury.
Yeah. Malik Jackson, what did you think of his performance this season, and is there a chance that he comes back next season, more or less because of the need at defensive tackle for the Browns?
Yeah. As a leader, he contributed extremely well, I thought. His play on the field was not, stellar, but, as a consistent, everyday type of player, he was good value for the Browns. And looking at, where we are at the D tackle position, right now we've really only got two guys on their rookie deals, Jordan Elliott and Tommy Togiai, under contract That
That's not much
defensive
to hold
tackle
on.
going in. We're thinner than we were this time last year, and we were really concerned about it.
Do you remember how many defensive tackles the Browns had on their roster and back in
in training camp?
Training
yeah, it's
camp?
like 12, I think. I mean, it's a ridiculous.
It's like, look how many guys they've got.
Right.
They got two guys.
They're bringing in guys on UDFA deals and just throwing everything at the wall to see what'll stick. And Malik Jackson was sort of the constant out of all of that, veteran leader. And I almost think that at this point, unless something really strange happens, they got to look at bringing him back just for that that stability at the position.
Yeah, I kind of feel I feel the same way. I don't think he's a guy who's going to demand a big salary anywhere. So I think the Browns would probably be happy to bring him back for another season.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be another 1-year deal in the same kind of range. I mean, he's 32 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, even if he doesn't play a lot, I almost think he's got to be high on your list of guys you bring back.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's talk about Anthony Walker, also an unrestricted free agent. Again, 1-year deal, not a big contract. I believe he led the team in tackles, kind of what inside linebackers do. But what did you think of his play? And what do you think about the market for him and kind of where he ranks on the Browns, linebacking core?
I think without Anthony Walker, the Browns will be extremely young in the linebacker room next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can underestimate the impact that he had on JOK and guys like Jacob Phillips, the younger guys who we're going to be looking to in the fall. So I think having that vet leadership and the Indy locker room was super high on him when we signed him last year. I think he's a great locker room guy. He's 26 years old. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think based on what we've seen in the past and what else is going to be out there, this guy, I think that we need to bring back. I would look at him as the bridge to those guys that are on the rookie deals. And, when they're going to need to get paid at some point, I would slot him in that $5 to $8 million range on a 2 or 3 year deal. I know the Browns aren't big on linebackers and paying linebackers. But man, a guy who's consistent like that, it's going to be hard to find with that kind of leadership.
Yeah, I don't know if that brings it back, honestly.
Maybe
just
not,
because I'm wondering what kind of a salary he's going to demand on the open market. It might be more than that after this season in Cleveland and what he's done in his career. So I think
again the risk of a prove it deal, right?
Yeah, I mean he played well. And like you said, I think he helped the young guys in that, but they're not going to bring him back at what they paid him this year. So the question is, how much? And you're not going to just be able to go out and find another guy like that. It's not going to be easy because experienced middle linebackers, it's a tough position to fill. It just really is. So that's going to be very interesting to watch, to see what they do. I would agree with you though, with that I would think they would want to bring him back, but we're at that same spot of how much value do they put on the linebacking position. That's they did go up and get JOK, so I guess they do see some value there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Let's go to David Njoku, who is an unrestricted free agent now. And let's see.
You either love him or you hate him, right?
You either love him or you hate him. Everybody, I think he's a guy. I've seen a lot of people say you have to bring him back. You have to bring him back. He's the best tight end the Browns have. Okay, the best out. Should the Browns definitely bring their best wide receiver back too?
Yeah.
Just saying. David Njoku, for me, I like the guy. I mean, he's a physical freak. He makes some, excellent catches. I mean, I'm just going to say this. I don't have anything against any of these guys. I like all these Browns. I root for all these guys. And this is all just business when I'm talking about stuff like this. But Njoku has, throughout his career, made the tough catch and dropped the easy catch. And he still did that this year. Okay. He had stretches where he looked really, really good, and he had stretches where he disappeared. Okay. He had a decent season, 400 and some receiving yards, I think. Not bad for the amount of receiving yards that the Browns had, but nothing earth shattering at all. When you look at top tight ends in the league, this is not a guy who's going out and taking games over. This is a guy who's going out and getting his 2, 3, 4 catches a game. So the question is, what's it going to cost to bring him back? And again, is that worth that much to the Browns? And I don't care where this guy was drafted. I don't care if he's a first round pick or a 7th round pick. He's been in the league. How many years is this? He's played
5. I mean, he was a first round pick, and he played out his contract.
Yeah, he played out his contract. So yeah. So he's been here long enough. His draft status doesn't mean anything anymore. So I don't care about that. The question is, how much is it going to cost to bring him back? And is it worth keeping him for that amount of money?
Yeah.
And if it's going to cost, $10 or $12 million a season to bring this guy back, I don't think it's worth it. That's my thought. So, I just because people think he's the best, I think the Browns still need to address the tight end position. I think it's going to take a couple of seasons, but I'm not against bringing him back, but I'm certainly against paying him a ton of money because I don't think he's worth it. That's my thought.
I think most people want to retain David Njoku because they feel that he's better than Austin Hooper. And people look at that Austin Hooper signing as a major mistake. And Austin Hooper's being way overpaid. And they say, well, let's just cut Austin Hooper and keep David Njoku because he's a better player, got more upside.
It doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah. That was going to be my point. We're on the hook for probably close to $15 million to Austin Hooper for at least the next 2 seasons. Guaranteed money. Okay, so Austin Hooper, unless we can find somebody really gullible somewhere, is not going anywhere.
I think they have an out after the 22 season potentially with Hooper.
It's a huge amount of money, though. It's still a huge amount of money. It's in the $10 million plus range. Okay, that they would be swallowing to just cut your number 1 tight end, or who was brought in to be your number 1 tight end. Okay. Right. My thing with David Njoku is his measuring stick should not be Austin Hooper. Okay. He's been with this organization 5 years. He's had 5 years to set his market value. And what you're seeing is that the Browns have not made an effort to extend him to this point because they don't believe that he's worth what his market value will command. And if they did, if they thought that this was a guy who was going to be worth $6 or $8 million a year, beyond 2021, you would have probably seen them 18 months ago trying to extend him at $5 to $6 million a year. Okay, because they would have seen the value in that. The reason you let a guy play the contract out is because there's still some value in getting a guy finishing out his rookie deal versus going to having to go out into the free agent market and replace him. At this point, I feel like for the next 2 years, we're better served to bring in a young tight end and try to grow that guy. And even if that means we're not going to find our feature tight end, so to speak, I think we're going to get as much production as we would out of the two guys that took most of the snaps this year, and for a fraction of the cost. So, look, in summary, if David Njoku was a candidate to be here beyond this year, he wouldn't be an unrestricted free agent right now.
I think you're right. Tight end is kind of a hot position, so I think somebody's going to offer him a deal, and and I think the Browns are not going to really have an interest in matching it. So I think that's pretty realistic.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's go on to Rashard Higgins. Honestly, it's kind of hard to evaluate Higgins because he didn't get a lot of playing time. Baker really didn't play all that great this season. But even with all that being said, I don't think there's a chance that Higgins is coming back. I think there's going to be turnover in this receiving core. I think the Browns are going to try to beef this receiving core up, and I think Higgins is going to be one of the guys who's probably not going to be back. They brought him back couple seasons in a row after he went to free agency. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't expect it to happen this time. So.
Agreed.
Okay.
It's an area of focus for the front office to rebuild the receiving core. And, the way you get better is by upgrading guys like your number 3 receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about MJ Stewart. He's an interesting guy. A cornerback, unrestricted free agent. He's in that $1 million range. Really looked pretty good near the end of the season. Playing some after being on the practice squad most, or at least a majority of the season.
Yep.
I think the guy can play. I'd really like him to. I'm not going to say I want him to start all the time or anything, but man, I think he should be. I think he should definitely be, given a shot at making the 53 for next season. So.
Yeah, it would be good. The only problem I think is that MJ put enough out on tape those last 3 games or so.
You think he's going to get a deal somewhere?
I think he's going to get a deal. Yeah. I mean, and then he kind of hinted at that. I think this week, saying how he enjoyed his time in Cleveland. I think he's going to be looking for something, something a little longer term than what the Browns are likely to give him. I think the value that he brings is in his versatility. He can be your swing guy between cornerback and safety. He played quite a bit of both for us those last few games, and I think he did really well. When our safeties were out. So that I think that versatility. He's still a reasonably young guy, and putting that out there on film. Yeah, I just don't think the Browns are going to have a shot at signing him.
I'll bet you're right. I'll bet you're right. As much as it hurts, because I feel like he's a guy who didn't get enough of a shot here, but the Browns have been pretty deep at corner, so I don't think it's that he didn't get a shot. It's just that he had better guys in front of him.
When our secondary is healthy, it's stout. And I think MJ got his opportunities because of the extraordinary circumstances of the past 2 seasons, and some injuries along the way. And it's always great to have those kinds of guys from a depth standpoint. And I would bring him back in a heartbeat, but something tells me he's going to be starting probably someplace else.
Well, yeah, I think you're right, and I think he earned it. So
good for him.
Yeah, I agree. So Malcolm Smith, here's a guy who this guy, he's an older guy, and he's really played well when he's been called upon during his time in Cleveland, and provided a lot of leadership. I'm sure along with Anthony Walker and that to the young linebackers. Do you think his time is up in Cleveland?
I kind of do. As a vet, depth guy, I thought he really filled his role quite nicely.
Yeah.
But the Browns just have to keep getting better and younger and faster. And you're going to see Jacob Phillips get those snaps, provided that he stays healthy. This is me knocking on everything wood I can find.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
But yeah, if Jacob Phillips stays healthy, it sort of, eliminates the need for a vet like Malcolm Smith. So, I think he's one of those guys that, the last few moves at the end of training camp or even, going into training camp, maybe one of the last signings that, you might pick up if he's still bouncing around out there because, his familiarity and so forth. But, as far as him, demanding a spot on the roster, probably not as much need for him this year as there has been the last couple.
Yeah. I kind of feel like the Browns, it depends on some of the other guys on the roster. I mean, we didn't see Tony Fields at all this season, so I don't know if he's going to challenge to actually play or make the team as an actual linebacker, next season or not. But the Browns could be looking to add another young linebacker
in the draft or even in free agency.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. But
so
Dustin Colquitt is also an unrestricted free agent. Chances that he is brought in to compete for a spot as the team's punter next season?
Dustin Colquitt's 40 years old. I'm not a lot older than that, and I probably have as much chance of making the roster next year as he does. I thought,
he did a decent job. I mean, he started out really well.
He did a decent job, but you have to understand that, punters are a week-to-week thing. And, Jamie Gillan just, for whatever reason, got into a funk and they needed to change that up. But, I certainly hope they can find somebody next year that is a more long-term solution. And I'm sure that's going to be one of the battles of training camp. They're going to bring in as many guys as they can look at and, see how that dust settles. Yeah. But I don't think it's Dustin Colquitt's job to win.
Yeah, I'm going to set the over-under on punters at training camp at 5.5?
That sounds right. If it's lower than that, they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so let's see. Ronnie Harrison. We've talked about Ronnie Harrison, and I think I know where you stand on Ronnie Harrison. He's a talented guy. He's a talented guy. He's got a little bit of the injury bug, and he's got a little bit of the bonehead bug in him too. But he's a talented player. So, you think? I guess first question is what kind of deal do you think he demands after his time in Cleveland? Do you think it's a pretty substantial deal on open market, or do you think he's still a little bit under the radar?
That is so hard to say. I mean, Ronnie Harrison is a conundrum wrapped in an enigma. Never has there been a guy that we needed to prove himself more. With the need for that third safety in Joe Woods' system. And I don't think we had one game this year. It might have been one or two games this year where we had those three safeties available. And
right.
it really limits what you can do, when you really kind of plan for a guy like that. And based on what safeties command in the NFL, veteran established safeties command a ton of money.
That's a lot
in the NFL.
Yeah.
To have him playing the last couple of years under $1 million, certainly we got our money's worth. Versus what a JJ3 costs, or some of the other premier guys out there, right? But I don't know about him. I don't know. I don't know what to think about him, because like you said, there were games where you said, wow, this guy can really play.
Yeah.
And then the next play he's on the sideline for one reason or another. So
he does stupid stuff, during the games, just the late hits and just stupid things. And you need guys who have composure on your team, and he seems to lose his composure very easily. But then he's got the talent factor. So, some guys can get to guys like that, some coaches and that, and, kind of reel it in, and some guys can't. So I guess that's part of the decision, and the money's another part of it. We'll see. It would be great if you felt like the Browns had another tight end, but the other guy's Richard LeCount, who couldn't even make it to a meeting this season. So, so I don't even know if he's going to be around next season. I almost feel like the Browns are going to draft a couple safeties again. It wouldn't surprise me.
Never hurts to take a safety and a cornerback in the mid to late rounds.
Yeah, definitely.
So I would really love to see us have 3 solid safeties next year and see what our top 5 defense would be capable of if we could really run those guys out there all year.
Yeah, well, I'm with you, Jeff. I don't know what's going to happen with Ronnie Harrison. I don't really have a good feel for what kind of deal or what kind of demand there's going to be for him, but I have a feeling it'll probably be higher demand and a higher deal than what we expect. So, I don't know. I almost feel like the Browns are going to address safety in another way. Other than trying to sign him again.
I think he's another guy in the David Njoku category where, if the Browns felt really good about him going forward, he would probably already have gotten an extension.
I kind of feel like, he and Njoku are very, they're similar.
Hot and cold players.
They're hot and cold players. Yeah, they are, and both tremendously talented guys.
Mm-hmm.
The guys who you want to root for, guys who you want to see do really well. Guys, you kind of like having them on your team and stuff, but you want more out of them.
Definitely.
So we'll see what happens with those two guys. Definitely.
Yep.
So there's a couple other UFAs, but I don't think anybody much to speak of. Elijah Lee played. He had a game or two where he was really good at linebacker, which is kind of surprising for a special teams guy. So we got Elijah Lee, Sheldon Day, who played pretty decent at times this year too, when he was on the active roster, and then Ryan Switzer, who was injured in training camp, I believe. So those guys were all UFAs. So chances of bringing any of those guys back, Jeff? Sheldon Day's been with the Browns for several seasons, I think. He might be a guy that, if there's not a demand for, they might want to bring him back just because of the need at that spot too.
Yeah, I just think we're in for another offseason of, 10 D tackles coming into training camp and just, seeing how it all shakes out, because there just isn't anybody in the draft that's going to come in and win a starting job.
Yeah.
And the two guys that we have under contract, I mean, Jordan Elliott might be the closest to being ready. But I don't think there's anybody that's going to win that job. So it's going to be a free-for-all, I think.
Yeah.
With the Malik Mcdowell news today, it's just a big open mess right now. And we'll have to see how the dust settles.
Yeah, so the Browns have some other guys who are RFAs and exclusive rights free agents as well, and Malik McDowell is one of them. So let's. I'm just going to let you talk about that, Jeff. It's an unfortunate news about Malik McDowell, who really had a nice season for the Browns. It's the kind of story you want, a guy who got really a second lease on life in the NFL from the Browns and comes out and. He played at times like just a man possessed, just a monster out there. And I think everybody really just was excited about this guy and how, just kind of looking, if this is what he can do in his first season, what can he do down the road?
Right.
And then this happens. So why don't you give us your thoughts?
I mentioned him, I think it was last week. As a guy who I thought really proved himself this season, more so early on in the year. He was a beast in training camp and in preseason. I think he wore down a little bit as the season went on, but again, for a guy who hadn't played football in so long, he produced. And he looked like a building block on that defensive line, which, again, beyond Myles Garrett right now, there's not a lot to build with. Today just kind of makes me sad. What happened yesterday. This is a guy who has really struggled to find his place, and for him to come into this organization and be part of this team. And, there were times where, you could see some of the veteran players kind of taking him under their wing and trying to keep him on the right path and so forth. And, you just kind of rooted for him all season long, to maintain that. But ultimately, the moment just may have been too big for him. And what transpired in Florida probably is just an example of a guy who couldn't do it on his own for whatever reason. And that makes me sad for him because, not just the fact that, we lose him as a player, but he's probably blown his only chance. Now, he'll probably get another chance from somebody just because of the talent. The talent's so big, and again, he's put some film out of what he's capable of. That some team's going to give him a chance at some point. It's not going to be in Cleveland. I think what he did basically was embarrassed this organization to the point that they have no choice but to walk away from him. And that's the saddest part of it, is that, what would the fan reaction be if, Andrew Berry said, "Oh yeah, we're going to bring him back." It just can't happen. So from a team standpoint, it's a huge loss. From an individual standpoint, it's a huge loss. From the fan standpoint, anybody that sees any humor in this is a really sick individual. There's just nothing funny going on here. It's about a 25-year-old man who has not figured out his life yet. And you only get so many second chances in life. To the fans who took that one step further and assumed that what he did today was because, he has some sort of mental disorder. Okay. That is about the most disrespectful thing you can think about a person and about mental illness. We tend to jump to that right away. Well, because somebody did something that we don't see as normal, there must be something wrong with them. Okay. It tarnishes all the good work that's been done to destigmatize mental illness. And it almost excuses the behavior to something that, he has no control over. Okay. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not able to diagnose the guy. Okay. But I know that he's 25 years old and he's made a lot of bad choices in his life. And he probably will continue to make bad choices in his life. Okay. Don't automatically assume that he needs help. Probably what he needs is guidance, structure, accountability. All those things need to come first. Let's hold him to that standard first before we assume that he needs help.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, let's couple other interesting RFAs and exclusive rights free agents. One is Dearness Johnson, who's a restricted free agent, who is pretty assuredly going to get some looks on the market, and should be interesting to see, what happens with him. So, what do you see happening with Dearness Johnson? I guess we have to look at what kind of tender the Browns put on these guys and everything, to see what happens. But Dearness Johnson's a guy who there've got to be some organizations out there that are saying, man, we'd like to have him start for us next season. And they'd be willing to give up, something pretty substantial to get him. So,
yeah.
Do you see the Browns putting a high tender on him and cashing in on getting a high pick on him, or what do you think happens with Dearness Johnson?
He's another guy who's earned it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming into this season, he was one of those guys that we were on the fence on. Was he going to make the 53? Was he going to be a practice squad guy? Because we were, we have the two horses, and how many touches is Dearness Johnson going to get? Well, as it turns out, with the Kareem Hunt injury, it was a damn good thing we had Dearness Johnson. With all the games missed by both guys, he became a workhorse for us. So I almost wonder if he at this point hasn't carved out a future for himself in Cleveland, as a guy that we're looking at 2 and 3 years down the road, who can be the next Kareem Hunt. I'd have to look at what Kareem's contract status is. I think he's got another 2 years.
He's got another, I think, 2 years.
Yeah. But, I like how Dearness Johnson played this year. He's a downhill runner. He earns everything he gets. And he's a humble kid,
which puts him right into that room.
Yeah, absolutely. Fits so well.
Yeah.
So, I'll be disappointed if he doesn't come back next year as a fan. But for Dearness Johnson, if he ends up becoming the 1 or 2 someplace else, I'll be a huge fan of his.
Yeah, I'll agree with you, and I'm going to go back to the the preseason and the roster projections. I'm one of the few people who had him on my 53, and I'm not going to let people forget that because many other people had him on the 53, but I did.
You're absolutely right. You did.
Yeah, so I had him on the 53, and I think it's going to be real interesting. I mean, he's another one of those guys in that group that we're really going to have to watch to see what happens with him. But like you said, it's kind of a win-win because I think you're either going to see him starting for somebody else next season and you're going to be happy for him, or he's going to be back in Cleveland and you're going to say yes. It's good that he's here. Right. So I don't think we can lose either way with Dearness Johnson. Michael Dunn and Blake Hance are both ERFAs. Those guys have to be back, right? Both of them.
Yeah, I think a lot about early are able to find a swing tackle, / utility guy in free agency with a little bit more experience. Both of those guys are getting up there in age a little bit. So you have to wonder their ceiling versus, a rookie draft choice from a developmental standpoint and so forth. I don't know. I'm a huge Blake Hance fan, as you know. I think, he far exceeded expectations the last 2 seasons. And Michael Dunn, again, would probably be a starting guard for a lot of teams in the NFL. We've got a shit pot of money committed to our 2 guards. A lot boils down to, like I said, how that room is made up. If it's made up of somebody in the Chris Hubbard mold, and one other guy. I think Blake Hance has the versatility to be that guy, whereas Michael Dunn is more of a guard, I think. But we have a lot of depth, in terms of developmental interior linemen. We're really thin at tackle, and that's going to, I think, be the main focus in the off season is solving that problem, and then you'll see whatever other guys get plugged in to round out that room, that offensive line room, based on who they think the best players are.
Yeah. I think it's tough to let either one of those guys go right now, but yeah, you got to see who they bring in, just because those guys do offer some experience, and you can put Blake Hance anywhere out there, and he's going to do a pretty nice job, at any of the spots. So, he and Chris Hubbard are pretty much, they're very similar in that respect. So, they just needed 2 more guys like that this year.
We have a bunch of young guys already on the roster. Guys that were on injured reserve, like Drew Forbes. They've signed a couple of guys to futures contracts already. On the line. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out. You can't bring back everybody.
No, and some of those guys have been kind of on the on the list of potential for a few seasons now. So we'll see. We'll see if they get to stay on that list, or whether the Browns say, hey, you know what, we got this guy in the draft that we really like. We're going to ride with him for a few seasons now.
Yeah,
should be interesting. So 2 guys left. One's Porter Gustin. He played a little bit this season. Do you think if Clowney's not back, do you think Porter Gustin gets much of a look next season, or do you think his time of really getting much play in Cleveland is over?
Well, yeah, I don't know. He didn't get a lot of playing time this year.
No, not really. He was on the practice squad a good portion of the season.
Yeah, mostly because those guys stayed reasonably healthy.
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know. He's one of those borderline guys that I don't know. It's going to depend on who else they're able to plug in.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Probably depends who they're able to sign in that. He's probably a fallback guy who's probably going to be out there. No offense to Porter Gustin, but well, I mean, he's an RFA, so they can do what they want with him. It's nothing urgent right now. The other guy is we'll move on to our last guy here, who's kind of interesting because of David Njoku and his contract status, and that's Stephen Carlson, who didn't play at all this season. He's hurt, but this guy's flashed a little bit as a receiver in the past.
Yeah.
And, he's never put up big numbers, but he's pretty sure-handed.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Carlson? And, if Njoku signs elsewhere, do you think Carlson could be that third tight end next season?
Oh, absolutely. He's done it in the past. I think your tight end room is going to be Hooper, Bryant, Gustin, and a rookie draft choice.
Carlson, yeah.
That's going to What did I say?
You said Gustin. You meant Carlson.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
We've been going for a while.
Yeah. So those three guys who have been on the roster and a rookie draft choice in the probably that one of those either late 4th or 5th round pick. I think there are some guys in the draft this year that are pretty similar to Stephen Carlson in makeup that maybe have a little bit more upside. That we will look to develop. So you got to have 4 viable tight ends on the roster. I think with the system that Kevin Stefanski wants to run, I don't think you have to have 2 number ones. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think we're going to go out and make a big splash anywhere else at the tight end position.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Okay, well, we've covered everybody of note. So there's a few other people, but yeah, those are most of the guys. So
the roster is going to be a moving target for the next 6 months.
It is. Yeah. We'll we're gonna keep talking about it. So, Have any closing thoughts, Jeff?
Well, I look forward to digesting this a little bit more. As far as the roster goes, I expect probably a more turnover this year than most people think. It might surprise a lot of people how much turnover there's going to be on the roster this year. Basically coming into 2021 with such a deep roster. But you have to remember, so many guys were on 1-year deals that we have no idea what the roster is going to look like next year. And I think the thing we haven't even factored in yet is the potential for trades and guys getting cut. And that's going to be real interesting as well. So lots to deal with over the off season.
Yeah, we'll touch on all that stuff as we go through the current roster or the 21 roster. So excellent. This has been the Browns Blitz, and we will catch you next time.